my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And it's been a while. Hashtag Titan19 has kind of shrunk to hashtag Mini Titan19. But you know what? I'm getting a little bit of grief on social media for procrastinating, for coming up with alternative projects that perhaps should be replaced with Titan stuff. And they're entirely right and justified, as always. So it's time to break out the airbrush. It's time to start the Warlord Titan properly. It's going to take a while. I'll be honest, but stick with the series. I'm hoping you'll enjoy it. I'm hoping you learn as much as I do during the process. Now, I have done Titans before, so it's nothing completely new, but this beast is on a different scale to even the Reaver Titan or the Phantom Titan that I've done before. So it's going to be a journey. Let's take a look at what we've achieved and how we've achieved it. So first up then, the entire legs have been lead belchered from a spray can over the top of the black prime that I've done. Now what we really want to achieve here is tonal variation in metal. Now normally you can get away without having to do this on small figures. You just go lead belcher and then you do Agrax Earthshade or Nuln Oil or whatever, and that's fine. But when you've got something like this, you need to have a look at the sort of the stresses and strains that are applied to metal, and you want to try and get underneath the overall effect, which is going to be kind of a brassy hue in the end of it. But what you want to do is achieve a load of underlaid colours. Now I'm showing up on the screen there. I'm mixing greys, purples, flesh colours, red, blue, and purple inks that are going to be used through the airbrush to achieve a whole bunch of weird tonal mixes that are going to go onto the metal. So that's the aim of the game so far, is to do that, and then it's all going to be dry brushed in silver, so that gives sort of a metallic sheen to those undertone colours, and then we'll wash it entirely in Griffin Sepia, and then we're good to go. And to be honest, you can only achieve this with an airbrush. Here's my trusty airbrush ready to go. A couple of other little tools and tricks that I'm going to be using. X20A Tamiya thinner and acrylic thinner for a bunch of these paints. A couple of paint pots to pre-mix some stuff. Nice little pipettes to get everything from any paint pots or whatever into the top of the airbrush. And then finally, I've bought myself a face mask because this room is quite small and the extractor's not particularly great, so it's time to start protecting my lungs a bit more. So I've made a mix of purple and grey. That's now in the airbrush, and you can just see what sort of colour that comes out. It's quite a purpley grey. And all I'm going to do is sporadically apply this to all of the leg sections. So the upper thighs and the lower calves and all that kind of stuff, all around the hips, and just to give some kind of purpley grey tonal variation. No hard and fast rule on this. It is just randomly applied. Just sort of swirl it around in and amongst it all. It doesn't overly matter as a motorcycle races past the front door. It doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure that you get it to all the areas that you're going to turn into this brassy metallic colour. So that's pretty much it. I've actually pre-mixed a whole bunch of this because I do have that other Nemesis Titan to do, and I might just try and batch paint a little bit, but we'll not worry about that. All we're going to do in this section is this purple and grey in and around in and around all the legs. With that grey-purple mix now dried, which through an airbrush admittedly doesn't take very long at all, this is the net effect, and you can see a flat purple, which is what really the grey does to that purple. It's not stupidly purple, but you're not going to see any purple, so don't worry about it. It's just an undertone mix that you're trying to achieve. Next up is a combination of basically a flesh colour and it's the old colour's Taucept ochre. This is a heavy ochre from Vallejo. It's kind of like a, I'm not even sure Games Workshop do an equivalent to this. It's like a Talon flesh, I guess. But this is the colour that we're going to be going for. And again, looks a little bit weird, but it's all about this weird variation, this tonal variation that is going to lie underneath the total metal effect. Again, just applying it in random patterns, in and around and overlapping the purpley grey mix we've already done, and you can just see that beginning to take a bit of colour onto these metal areas as I stick my head in front of the camera. It's very difficult to try and get in. You can see the size of these legs in the airbrush booth. It takes up the whole thing, so I'm trying to lean forward to see what's going on. You can see my wonderful grey hair going on. But that's all we're going to do with that, is just apply random patterns all over this bad boy, just to give a different tone ready for the metallic work later. And the net result of that, once that's kind of dried, is this, really. I'm just going to try and show it up. I've actually got some stills that I'm going to throw into this video so you can see it a little bit more clearly in a light box, because trying to do this at this angle is quite painful. But you can see those sort of patches of paleness and the purpley greys are in there now. So what we're going to do is add some ink or some colour glazes. So I've got purple and blue. I'm also going to add red to that. I don't actually have a red glaze from Games Workshop, so I'm going to actually use a Tamiya Clear for that, but it's the same kind of result. With the airbrush loaded up with some purple glaze mix, then this is Games Workshop's version of that purple. It's Druki Violet, I think it is. Again, just applying it in random, more solid patches this time. So it's almost like a bruised effect. This is going to create, actually it's a very good description, it's a bruising effect to the metal where it's been twisted and under strain and stress. And that's what all three of these colours, the red, blue and purple, are going to achieve all across the legs. So you can just see, just applying it in a slightly more solid area. Again, fairly random, but you know, it's slightly differently applied to the other colours. It's a weird way of explaining it, but you can see I'm just sort of focusing in on a couple of major areas of the model just as I spin it round, rather than just randomly spraying it all over the legs. I'm just picking patches, and you can see me doing that just on the top of that hip joint there. With the purple applied, we're going to switch to blue now, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to clear that through the airbrush so it stops going purple, start spraying blue, do exactly the same thing. This time you can actually go over some of the purple and it will actually darken it down a little bit as well, as the purple mixes with the transparent blue paint. So just again in sort of vague areas, sort of larger areas across the model, all the way up and down the legs, just adds to that bruising effect. The final one of these is from Tamiya Red Clear. Now this stuff, in the one I own, is actually really old and quite bitty, and it actually didn't do my airbrush any favours because it's full of dried grit, and you can see that coming out in the newspaper. But I persevered, but I'm not going to be putting this stuff through my airbrush again. I'm going to throw it away because it was blocking up the needle. This is a brand new airbrush and I really don't want to use that paint again and for it to kill my airbrush. But just go through it again exactly the same as we've done with the others, just picking out areas, and this adds a bit more lighter variation to the purples, the greys and the blues that we've already done. And it goes nicely over the sort of the Tau-Sept ochre areas that we've already done, that lighter pinkish skin colour that we did. This mixes really well over the top of that. The penultimate stage for this then is a dry brush of gunmetal or lead belcher. So I've got my little pot here and I've got a large dry brush, and the idea isn't to completely saturate the model in silver. You really want those hues to come through, but you're just going to try and turn those hues into a metallic colour. So it's a fairly light dry brush, but again, you don't want it just to sit there as it was. You want to give it a good covering is probably not the right word. It's just a constant light dry brush until you sort of bring it up to the colour that you want. So it's a trial and error thing. I've done this before, but you can just see that I still want the purples and stuff to show through, but the gunmetal is just going to pick out more of an edge thing. And if you've got those flat surfaces, just go over those a couple of times just so that the metallic pigment in the paint sort of rubs off into those larger areas. Now the final stage of this is the Griffin Sepia. This is going to turn all that metallic work into a brassy kind of colour. If you don't have to do that, if you just want that pure silvery metallic look, you could stop right here, but I really want to go with that brassy look. That's what I've done on the Reaver Titan, so I'm just going to try and emulate that, because they come out of the same Forge World, they come out of the same workshop for me, so they're probably using the same raw materials to build their Titans. So all I'm going to do is just load up the airbrush with that, and I'm just going to spray that liberally all over, and you'll see it just change the tone of all that metallic work into a brass effect. Now I'm recording this fairly late at night, so when I was painting this, the light was pretty bad, so you can't completely see from this this camera angle. So what I've done is capture a few of these stills in the light box. You should be able to see something a bit more clear, shall we say. So the photos are unedited. These are straight out the light box. Show that tonal variation and show the result of that Griffin Sepia applied. So these next couple of pictures, then you can see a little bit clearer. So I've not edited this in the photo box. It's so big it takes up most of the light box anyway, so it's quite difficult. But you can see here the bruised metallic effect we've got after we've done the grey, the purple, the flesh tones, and the 3 different colours of ink or shade wash. And you can see that after this one here, this is after the metallic dry brush over the top of it. So you can still see those weird tonal variations, but you can quite clearly see this is now a lot more metallic than it was with just those weird colours applied in random patches. It does begin to look a bit metallic. Now this one is after the Griffin sepia has been applied, and you can see, yeah, in some of the pictures it's a bit difficult to see, but you can certainly see it a bit closer up. This now does look a lot more brassy. It still looks metallic, but it hasn't got that flat metal look. It's got that variation. Now if you've watched any of my Titan painting guides, you know my foot painting technique so far. So we use a granite colour, Caradon granite first. I've still got enough to do the toes on this guy. So what we're going to do is just hand paint in at this stage all of the toes in Caradon granite. If you can refer back to my other videos, but I'm going to show it back again on this one, just because they are slightly bigger than some of the Adeptus Titanicus ones that you may have seen on the channel recently. But whilst that toe base coat begins to dry, a bit of concurrent activity, all I'm going to do is black in every piston that we've got with a Baden black. So there's lots of pistons, there's like 8 round the hips, there's 4 on each of the upper thighs as well. Just going to paint those in a Baden black, probably a couple of thin coats actually to go over the metallic base. Just going to be really careful not to cover any of the work that we've done so far, because you can't really go back to that airbrush technique once you start hand painting here, because it's just going to be too difficult. So be super careful. Exactly the same as with the Adeptus Titanicus stuff and Reaver Titans and so on. A bunch of different shades of metal that are going to go onto the toes over this Caradon granite base coat. We're going to start with tin bits. We're going to stipple that on with a sponge. Then we're going to move on to mixing that with 50-50 with gold and tin bits just to lighten that up. Then we're going to go with chainmail. We're going to go with gunmetal, and then we're going to go with a couple of lighter silvers. And once all that's done, we're back on with the Griffin sepia again, or Seraphim sepia. Sorry, Griffin sepia. That's an old colour, isn't it? Surely. Just to tie all of those metallics together. Couple of bits of off-cut sponge will do the job nicely. First up is the tinny bits, or tin, whatever tin colour you've got, basically a dark metal. And we're going to stipple this on with that sponge. We're going to sponge chip all over the place. About 80% coverage if you can go for it, get in all the nooks and crannies and so on. Really just sort of force this colour down over that base coat that we've got so far. So go quite heavy with this colour, and that's not a problem. We're going to go with gradual lighter effects afterwards. So we're going to take our tin bits and mix that 50-50 with some gold now. So I'm just going to do a little stripe of tin on the palette and another bit of gold. We're going to mix that together, and then we're going to apply this exactly the same way. But we're probably going to go for about 60% coverage now rather than 80. And we're going to aim for some of the higher points, but really make sure that we just get good coverage again, but still have that original base tin colour just slightly showing through. So we just grab our bit of sponge, and we're just going to get some of that on the end there, dab some of it off so it's not completely drenched, and then just start dabbing that all over the toes, exactly as you can see on screen. Nice and simple. As said at the start of this section, we're just going to rinse and repeat with gunmetal or lead belcher, but this time just focusing on some of the more higher areas, some of the bits that are just going to wear through that metallic. If you imagine a factory fresh model, we're just going to add this as extreme weathering. So this is going to go on all the leading edges, all the main parts of the front of the toe, around the sides and so on, just to give that very worn effect. Then the final bit of sponge stippling that we're going to do on here, just sponge effect, is with that lighter chainmail colour. And again, we're just going to focus on the more extreme points, right on these corner of the toes, the leading edge and so on like that, just with the extreme areas. You're probably, the first silver layer, you're probably looking at maybe 30%. With this, you're probably looking at about 10% of the toes to have some of this on. Probably even less, really. Just where you see fit and just where you want to make sure that weathering and that worn effect looks good. Finally, we're back to the Seraphim sepia again. We're just going to get a large shade brush on this and just dab that all over the toes, just to tie those metallic colours together. Now, there will be a whole bunch of weathering powders that's going to go on after this and over the legs. Lots of weathering still to go. This is just getting that base metal work looking good. And you can tell just because of the colours I've used here, there's no purples or anything like that. There's a lot more silver going in here, so it does actually look a little bit more of a different kind of metal to the rest of the legs. Just because we're using the same shade doesn't mean the net effect looks the same. So you do get that, you know, hardened, super hard looking toes for this model. So finally then, just a few more stills with the toes and the legs put together now, so you can see the toe painted. And I'm just going to show all 4 angles just so you can see the net effect of the metallic work that's been achieved on the legs. And you can see all the pistons are all blacked in as well now, and we'll get to those on the next stage, as well as finishing off all the details in that large hip section, and probably the toe, the foot plates as well. These are the kind of last bits of detail. So we're going to do the pistons. We'll do that, yeah, the big chunk of silver in the middle, and then where we've still got that silver foot plate, and then we'll probably move on to some weathering as well. So I want to get all that done so that this is then completely sealed and ready and dry to go for all the armour panels later on. But just as an element of scale, an Armiger Warglaive doesn't even come up to its kneecap. So there we go then, guys. Quite a lot, I think, has been achieved on the legs. Obviously there's still quite a lot more to go. We've still got more details on the pistons to go. We've got weathering to do, chipping effects, all that kind of stuff, and obviously the armour panels still to go on that as well. That's going to be an entirely different series. Well, part of the same series obviously, but an entirely separate part of the project is to do all of those armour plates entirely separately of the main structure of the beast. Now a lot of the techniques that I've done on this will be just applied to a lot of the weapons, to the main torso, but there's a lot more details, a lot more cables and power coils and cells and all that kind of stuff to go on with that thing. So, but a lot of the metallic kind of techniques that I've used on this will be directly applied to pretty much most of the metallic part of the model. And again, once you've done all this work, you are going to cover up, you know, a fair portion of this with all the armour panels. But you know what, when you buy a model of this kind of scale, this kind of quality, you want to do it as much justice as your skill level will allow you to do. Don't just you know, paint it silver and dunk it in Nuln Oil and call it done. That's not what you buy this kind of kit for. You buy this for the journey. The journey's going to be long, painful, and use an awful lot of paint, but it's going to be good fun. Honestly, that's what I keep kidding myself. That's why I've put it off for so long. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something new. If you are super hyped for this series and you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to do so. Leave some comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I've managed to achieve so far, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.